let's take a deep dive then into the implications of the electrification of everything. Is the future electric? Dr. Fadi Birol is the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, who has an outlook. And would you please join me, sir, on the stage before I introduce my panelists? Thank you, sir.
So, many thanks. The main idea I wanted to share with you is the share of electricity in the energy world will increase substantially in the next years to come, and this will have implications for the energy industry, for governments, for energy security, and also for environment. But before going to electricity, to put the things in a context, we see in the next years to come 4 major upheavals in the global energy markets, 4 of them. Number 1, US is becoming the undisputed leader of oil and gas production worldwide, both in terms of the amount of oil, amount of gas coming from the United States, and the speed of it, impressive. When we look at the shale oil growth, in a few years of time, we have seen such an immense expansion only once in the history of oil. It was the Ghawar in Saudi Arabia. Same applies to natural gas. The shale gas expansion and the production growth in the United States is larger even the West Siberia expansion of the former Soviet Union. In terms of the amount of oil and gas coming to markets, and in terms of its speed, it is unique, and it will be one of the major upheavals of the global energy markets, we believe, in the next years to come. Number 2, solar power becoming the cheapest source of new electricity power plants. The cost coming down rapidly. Only in the last 3 years, 2014 to 2017, cost of solar is halved. Think about the oil prices, which was about $55 last year on average, would go down to 22, just to put in a context. Plus, we believe in the next 3 years, between 17 and 20, there will be another halving of solar power. So oil prices going to $6, to put in a context. And this is becoming the preferred source of power in many countries, especially the big ones, such as China and India. Number 3, something that we have not talked much in the last 2 days, which is for me critical. China is changing. China is changing. China has a new economic policy, which they call rebalancing of the economy, namely moving Chinese economy from a heavy industry-based economy to a lighter, more modern economy. End of last year, there was the Chinese Communist Party Congress, one of the most important political instances in China, and the President Xi came up with a motto to make the skies of China blue again, which means putting a lot of emphasis on clean energy and energy efficiency. In fact, as of the end of 2017, China is #1 in solar in the world, #1 in wind energy in the world, #1 in terms of electric cars, #1 in terms of efficiency, and #1 in terms of new nuclear power plants. And this will go, and this will have implications for all energy markets. Remember, 10 years ago, when we had the China boom, we have seen the impacts on the oil prices, coal prices, and we are going to see this impact on different areas, and we are already seeing, for example, in the last month, on the natural gas markets. So China is changing, and given the sheer size of the country, everything else will change as they are the biggest player in the markets. Number 4, upheaval, which will transform our energy markets, we identify is the electrification of the energy industry as a result of increasing cooling needs. It's a very important issue, increasing digitalization, electric cars, and other things. So these 4 major upheavals are the ones we think will give a shape to the global energy markets in the next years to come. Of course, there are other trends, but they are in transformative nature for many markets and many countries. Now, the changes, what I have mentioned, many of them give us an impetus to rethink our energy security, our view on the geopolitics of energy, and also in terms of sustainability, because the parameters are changing significantly. These, ladies and gentlemen, these changes are so big that no country is immune to the effects of that. No country is an energy island. And governments, companies, citizens, if they are not able to read, we believe, these changes and their speed especially, and their size, they may well make wrong decisions in terms of investment, plans, and strategy. Coming to the electricity. Now today, this is the electricity power, the size of the electricity markets, different parts of the world, and the growth to 2040 for some regions. I want to highlight 3 regions. First, Middle East will increase this power in the next 20 years, more or less what we have today, doubling of the current capacity. Big challenge. And which technologies to be chosen will be critical for the region. But there are 2 countries which we have to keep a close eye on. One of them is India. Now, we have many colleagues here from Commission. I think Metit was here. I don't know if she is still here from the Commission. Yes, Metit, our colleague from the director from the Commission. They discuss every day in Brussels if we change the power market-related legislation this way, can we reduce the emissions 5%? If we do the gas like this, it is increase the renewables 10%. With talking about the 5%, 10% of the EU power market. But, ladies and gentlemen, India, in the next 20 years, is adding 1 Europe. We have already 1 Europe in terms of size of the power markets, and in 20 years, India will add 1 Europe. How important the choices in India are. Think about the discussions we have in Brussels about the 10% of the current power capacity in Europe, but India is adding another Europe. It's not finished. This afternoon, we discussed about the US electricity markets. The decision of FERC Are we going to support, is the government going to support nuclear or renewables? How will it change 2%, 3% in 2025, etc.? But, ladies and gentlemen, China is adding in 20 years one United States. So in 20 years, we will have 2 Europes compared to today and 2 United States added. This is amazing. Therefore, why I'm saying this, decisions which will be made in New Delhi or in Beijing will affect all of us. If they go for technology X, this will bring the cost of those technologies down. If they go for technology Y, which would require that fuel, it can be coal or gas or whatever, this will have implications for the entire markets. So, okay to see what kind of decisions coming from Washington, from Brussels, from Tokyo, but when if we want to understand the developments in the electricity markets, we have to see what decisions are made in New Delhi or in Beijing in terms of electricity markets. Now, there is a strong discussion on electric cars. Many countries are pushing the button in electric cars. In UK, in France, in Netherlands, Norway, China is being the leader. The question is the following. 2 questions. Is the penetration of electric cars, does it mean the end of oil or the peak of oil? Because this is very much discussed. We discussed it since almost 5 years, every Davos meeting. Okay. Are we going to see a peak oil? And the second, electric cars, are they going to solve our climate problem? Okay, I am going to give the answer, or try to give the answer for both of them. Just to put in a context, today in the world, we have 2 million electric cars, the cities of the world. 2 million electric cars, and we have 1 billion cars. Out of 1 billion cars, we have 2 million electric cars. And as a result of government policies in China, in Europe, and elsewhere, electric cars are growing their sales substantially. And we believe in 20 years of time, we may well have 300 million electric cars. And our numbers are very much in line with many colleagues working on this on a daily basis, 300 million electric cars. So what does this mean for oil markets? So I want to answer this to you, because this is a very important issue, because some people call, as a result of this huge penetration of electric cars, we may not need any more oil, or no more oil investments are needed. Are we seeing a peak oil? My answer is, with these policies, absolutely not, for the following reasons. This electric car penetration, plus the existing cars, the traditional cars becoming more efficient, we are going to see that the oil demand for cars, passenger cars, will decline slightly compared to today. Plus, we will see also oil used in, for example, in electricity generation declining. Especially in this region, we use a lot of oil to generate electricity, which is economically perhaps not the best way to do, and many countries, including this very country, replace oil by gas, by solar and other things. It is going to go down. But why do I say that we will still see oil demand growth? Because demand growth is coming from somewhere else. It is driven by trucks, by jets, and petrochemical industry. These are the drivers. When we look at the newspapers, you see every day a news about electric cars coming from the United States, from Europe, and elsewhere. Nothing about trucks. But the trucks use same amount of oil, emit more emissions than the electric cars, or the cars in general, I should say. Today, more than 50 countries, ladies and gentlemen, in the world have fuel efficiency standards for cars, passenger cars. In the United States, we say CAFE standards. In Europe, we have fuel efficiency standards. How many liters you use for 100 kilometers? More than 50 countries. Do you know how many countries have fuel efficiency standards for trucks? Only 4. And I give you a number. In the last 3 years, more than 30% of the global oil demand growth came from the Asian trucks only. So more than 30% of the oil demand growth came from the Asian trucks only. So this is, for me, a major blind spot of the debate we have in the energy. The same for jets. The same for petrochemicals. Why I am mentioning these 3 areas? Because it is very difficult to substitute oil with other fuels here. It is not impossible in the longer term. Technology improves. We have new things to discover. But in the short and medium term, we don't see any major penetration possibilities of oil, substitution possibilities of oil in jets, in trucks, and elsewhere. This is one area. So, yes, electric cars will increase, but we will still see an oil demand growth as they are driven by other sources of oil use. Second, as you see in televisions, except for some of them, they say, electric cars are the solution to the climate change problem. If this penetration happens, this spectacular penetration of electric cars happens, the impact of this penetration on the global CO2 emissions after 2 decades will be less than 1%. Okay, less than 1%. Why? Because of 2 reasons. Number one, cars in general, as of today, even with we have the traditional cars, they are not a major source of CO2. They are important, but they are not the biggest one. Second, for the electric cars, to run the cars, you have to get the electricity from the power plants, and still we will be using significant amount of gas, coal, and other sources. So, to sum up, electric cars will grow very strongly as a result of cost reduction, but we will still need oil, and this will not be electric cars alone will be a solution to our problem of climate change. Now, why do we say, as the IEA, electrification is coming so strongly? Now, this is the energy demand. If you see 1990 index to 100, this is the electricity demand. Electricity demand, for example, in the last 25 years grew much stronger than the total energy demand, and in the next 2 decades or so, electricity demand will grow 2 times faster than the total energy demand. Once again, electricity demand will grow double the rate of the total energy demand. Why it is happening? One, again, a subject we don't talk much, but it is industrial motors. It is becoming more and more electrical. Second, cooling. So we are going to make a report on that. Again, for me, one of the blind spots of our energy debate, cooling, air conditioning is becoming a major source of electricity consumption. China, India, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. And also digitalization is another driver. One of our numbers show last year is that we look every year the oil, gas, electricity industry investments, total energy investments. For the first time since 80 years, electricity investments made in the world were higher than oil plus gas investments. And some of the oil and gas companies, big ones, are now finding a way to slowly but surely going in the electricity sector, as we believe electricity is the future of energy in many ways. Before finishing the electricity discussions, I want to tell you another important electricity issue which is very close to the heart of the International Energy Agency, namely the access to electricity in developing world. Today, according to our numbers, 1.1 billion people, about 20% of global population, they have no access to electricity in many parts of the world. But here also there are interesting developments. Now, we have the India problem, one part of the electricity access, lack of electricity. Second is the rest of Asia, especially Southeast Asia, and the third one is the Sub-Saharan Africa. Now, in the recent times, we have seen that India is doing a perfect job. Prime Minister Modi's one of the major objectives was bringing electricity to all Indians. And they are doing an excellent job. In 11 years of time, they are bringing electricity to 500 million people, half a billion. It's a very strong work. And when we look at the numbers, how it is going, we see India, only in a few years of time, there will be universal electricity access in all India, thanks to this very government, to be honest with you. They just went frontal and they bring electricity. They are bringing electricity to all of their citizens. Other Asia, major improvement in Pakistan, Bangladesh happening, but the problem remains in Sub-Saharan Africa. We have been discussing this issue, electricity access issue, since 20 years. There were three major areas of problem: India, Southeast Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. It is now electricity access is becoming only a Sub-Saharan Africa problem. The challenge is focusing there. So, let me finish my words by telling you that we think electrification is coming very strongly. Not only the electricity is the future, I believe future is also electricity. And this is for many reasons, including the digitalization of our economic and social lives. Investments are increasing substantially in electricity, but I would like to remind you, this is also a critical subject. I hope the panel discusses, and I and many of us benefit from this discussion. Investments are happening, most of them in the regulated markets where it is guaranteed, the returns. Okay, about 95%. Either countries like China and others, or renewables where there are strong guarantees coming from the governments. We think, as I showed to you, the investments in the electricity systems, especially in China and India, will affect all of us. What kind of technology they will choose. Today, China, when you look at the solar power penetration, it is becoming cheaper. Why? Because China put a lot of weight behind that. Today, ladies and gentlemen, 6 out of 10 solar panels sold in the world are made by Chinese manufacturers. So if China or India, given the sheer size of their markets, go for this or that technology, it will affect all of us, and implications for energy security and also clean energy transition. Demand will grow substantially, twice the rate of the total energy demand. So we'll be discussing more and more electricity in the future, and it is driven by from cooling to desalination, from the electric cars to other uses. And given the increasing importance of electricity in the energy markets, our flagship publication, World Energy Outlook, next year will focus on this. What are the issues, what are the challenges country by country, and what are the implications of the right and wrong choices in terms of electricity investments. So to finish, we think our numbers show that, as our moderator said, the future not only the past in Sussex, but the future of the world is electricity, and electricity is the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dr. Birol, thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. What a great start for what will be, I know, a great panel as well. We will take some questions towards the end, so do have those ready. And I know that Dr. Birol is going to sit in the audience, and I know, sir, that you'll be happy to take questions should they be posed to you. So without further ado, let me introduce my next three guests. I'm delighted to have these gents on the stage. His Excellency Fahad Al-Hamadi is the Assistant Undersecretary for Climate Change and Green Development of the UAE. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. Mr. Badr Al-Lamki is the Executive Director of Clean Energy at Masdar, much discussed over the past couple of days. And Mr. William Cannon is the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Environment and Infrastructure at Sumitomo Group Corporation of Americas. Sumitomo Group Corporation of Americas. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Thank you, guys. I guess the first question ought to be, given what we've just heard on the outlook from the IEA, Your Excellency, is there anything in what you heard from Dr. Birol that you don't agree with or that doesn't fit with your own particular outlook on what might be an electrifying future?
Thanks, Becky, for having us. It is with a great pleasure to be here with the team, and thanks, Dr. Fred, for the presentation. We've seen it. Actually, what he went through the presentation is something that we are really witnessing is happening. And it's happening in increasingly and very fast, where sometimes we see it's happening in the country and the region around it. We see there is a future of the electrification. We see the world record prices for the electrification is happening in this region. We see it. It's really happening, where figures and facts are the things that prove that things is happening in the region. So when we talk about electrification, it is happening in everything surrounding us.
Tackling climate change is a complicated issue, to say the least.
Very complicated.
But as one expert put it, here's a good rule of thumb for how to get started. Electrify everything.
Everything.
The UAE, of course, has expressed its commitment to the Paris Climate Accord and has pledged to reduce carbon emissions 70% by 2050. So before I pick up this conversation with your esteemed colleagues, how will increased electrification in these sectors here help the UAE achieve that goal? And what sort of, sorry, and I want to just put this to you as well. Which technologies do you believe will populate the electrical or electricity platform?
Okay. Today, for example, when you look at the energy, which is the discussion of this forum, if I took it as a one portion, look at it from different angle, what is happening in this region? You would see the most affected portion is the transportation sector, and that is something we've been witnessed in the countries. Take an example, the electric vehicle are rapidly taken off in the country, especially since Tesla, Elon Musk visited the World Government Summit last February, and later on he opened the first showroom in the region in UAE. Now, if you are landing in Dubai International Airport, you can get your Tesla taxi chauffeur where it can take you to your home. So, in parallel to that, there are things happening together with it quietly, where people started to notice it is happening. For example, when you look at DEWA, Dubai Electricity and Water Authorities, since 2015 or 14, they started to install these electrical charging stations using different technologies, where it can charge the vehicle in less than 20 minutes, 30 minutes, while there are other technology where it charge electrical vehicle in 1 or 2 hours, where it's being provided at the park or shopping mall. What we are witnessing today is booming or moving the electrifications in the regions. And we see it's happening rapidly because the technologies and the cost is dropping down, especially when we talk about the solar part or solar energies. Since 2009, it has been dropped dramatically up to 60%, which create business opportunities, or I would say future opportunity for this sector. So what is the country doing today? Today, the total contribution of renewable energy or clean energy less than 1%. By 2021, we will achieve 27%.
27.
By 2021, we will achieve 27%. And then by 2050, we are targeting up to 50%, 44% from the renewable energies. And that has been witnessed from these upcoming projects that we see, some led by Masdar, by other entities, where it's going to be introduced in the upcoming years. Some of it in Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Solar Park. In Abu Dhabi, we have a project in Swihan and other projects, yes.
So, but I mean, this is a perfect opportunity to bring you in at this point. I know that Masdar isn't just investing in Abu Dhabi. Let's just talk about the kind of wider picture here. How do you buy the outlook from the IAEA, for example? These goals that have been set locally are big goals. How does electrification fit in to where you are at Masdar? This is an organization, I remember when it started off, and I thought this has got early mover advantage. Then things ebbed and flowed. Now you are in such a strong position, not just locally, as I say, but internationally as well. How does electrification fit into the big picture?
Becky, I think the view from Masdar perspective very much mimics and supports the remarks made by the Professor in his opening remarks. We are witnessing today a global energy transformation, if you like, towards electrification. This is driven by the conversion between the technologies, both on supply side, supply of electricity and supply of energy, and also from demand side management. We are seeing the cost of renewables falling down quite rapidly. We've seen the cost of solar PV in particularly have dropped in the last 3 years, more than half. We are seeing energy storage coming to play increasingly. We take pride also in Masdar being at the front edge of deploying energy storage in our projects. Up in Scotland, for example, we have a project under implementation today combining offshore wind energy with energy storage battery and making a true example of implementation at scale. We are seeing energy efficiency systems being implemented increasingly in this region, backed by regulation that will attract and incentivize consumers to consume electricity more efficiently. But again, this is towards more electrification at the consumer's level, but also at an industrialization level. We are seeing digitalization. We are seeing decentralization of electricity systems. The 1 billion people that do not have access to electricity in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, for example, can only access electricity through means of renewables, through decentralized distributed generation systems. So I think from a Masdar perspective, we support the outlook, and I think we stand as a credible partner in this journey as it evolves. 12 years ago, when Masdar was created, was a bold vision by the leadership of this country that anticipated that this very same reality that we are facing today would happen. And today, we have 3 gigawatts of renewable energy portfolio globally, from East Europe to West Europe to Southeast Asia, Middle East and North Africa, and there's increasing appetite for us to expand in our footprint, geographical footprint, that is.
Very good point. Let's take on one of the questions that Dr. Birol posed. Investments are happening in regulated markets with guaranteed returns. You've just alluded to sub-Saharan Africa, for example. Can you just describe or give us some sense of your investment strategy going forward, which will which will bring in the kind of numbers that we saw, for example, China, India. Those are absolutely fascinating numbers. Just give us a kind of forward-looking investment strategy, if you will.
Sure. So we are a for-profit organization to start with. So we look at each investment opportunity from risk-adjusted returns. We are global, so we evaluate each investment opportunity on case-by-case basis. And basically today we have 3 gigawatt that has been committed and under delivery, and we foresee at least in the coming 5 years to double that. But I think if you go back and take the bigger picture here, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, they project that by 2040 there will be nearly $10 trillion of new investment to cope up with the energy demand. The lion's share of this, nearly 70%, would come from sources like PV and wind. And I think today we have expertise as a company, Masdar, to be able to implement those projects, seize an opportunity there. So there's an ecosystem that is emerging here. There's demand forces, but also supply and technology evolution. And I think the recipe that we have been able to demonstrate that we have makes us more credible to seize such an opportunity moving forward.
Transportation, industry, cooling systems, as have been discussed at present. Your organization plays a huge role in building the infrastructure to facilitate increases in electrification. Where do you see the risks and the challenges?
Sure. So at Sumitomo, we do invest directly into the renewable energy and also gas-fired plants or coal-fired plants, whatever is appropriate for the country that we're operating in. But what do I see as sort of the main challenges for the, if you will, the electrification of everything? And I think some of the charts that we had seen earlier, right before this presentation, I think that the adoption on the transportation sector is perhaps the main impediment in the electrification of everything, for sure. And some of this is just consumer preferences. There's just choice not to buy EV. Some of it could be, to a certain extent, technology. Maybe the technology is not quite there yet for long-haul trucking in terms of the battery storage capabilities or the strength of the battery to help haul the freight. But I think one of the other bigger impediments is that frequently the electricity prices are utilized as a tool by governments to benefit lower income or to subsidize lower income. And so to the extent that you have distortions in the price of electricity or those sorts of regulations, it is going to be a bit of an impediment. And this is not to say that those policies are good or those policies are bad. I'm just saying that those policies are there, and it is indeed an impediment to sort of this electrification.
So where are the opportunities? It must be music to your ears to see the sort of graph that we just saw on the growth, the potential growth for electrification in China and in India, for example, and business going forward to be done, not in the Washingtons, the Brussels, and the Londons of this world, but in the Delhis and the Beijings. Just walk us through the opportunities. And do you buy this? The future is electric. Full stop. Despite it being your industry.
Right. I mean, you would think as a company, our first answer would be, we want to operate in where the markets are free. But honestly, no. We want to operate where the markets are closed. We want to operate where we can sell directly to the state-owned utility or some quasi-state entity, because they are the ones still willing to enter into long-term contracts to buy the power. And what that long-term contract, you can go and get financing and you can build a viable project. But if you turn that around to, say, Europe England or Australia or the US, it is much more challenging to sell power to the merchant market or to a market where there is no guaranteed return or there's no guaranteed price for your power. That's a little bit more challenging, and it's harder to make that return. And it's certainly when a company like mine and many other companies where there is, if you will, the internal fights for capital, and I go there and say, hey, I don't know what I'm going to make in terms of return, and someone else comes and says, I'm going to make this guaranteed or quasi-guaranteed level of return backed by a government agency, it's a no-brainer in terms of where my firm and where other firms would like to invest.
Your Excellency, what are the implications of an electric future for security and governance?
Well, when we speak about securities and governments, if you allow me to link things with the climate change, where we are always debating with the countries where the negotiation is happening, we see that the issues of the climate change is the greenhouse gases. That can be avoided if we started to introduce the renewable and the clean energies. In parallel to that, when you look to the current atmosphere, the hurricanes that we are experiencing nowadays, it creates some doubts that when you invest in these technologies or in these projects in certain region, at any time when you're exposed to a hurricane, it can damage everything. So it will require a time to build things back again. So we experienced, for example, in South America, where the recent hurricane hit, it could almost damage the infrastructure of that region. Again, if we are thinking of putting renewable energy, how we can sustain the future changes that we are exposing with the atmosphere. So for such as securing things related to the renewable or clean energy, we need to tackle things from different aspects. First, where are the guarantees for the investors if I would like to invest in renewable energy? Because investing in renewable energies, the return would take time, maybe 10, 15, or 20 years. It's not that quick when you do it in the others.
If at all at the moment. We heard in the last session that profitability is not correlated, or certainly hasn't been correlated to the growth of renewables up until this point.
That's wrong. So that is something that is slowing the investor to move toward these things. But I think the solutions where Mazda also is working into a certain number of projects, how we can sustain the challenges that we are experiencing from the climate change. Again, for investors or whoever want to secure these projects, they always look what are the returns. If you tell me that the returns will take 10, 15, 20 years, sometimes they can't wait for that time to come. But when you put some guarantees for them, where it will expedite the process or it can secure it for the future investment in this region.
Increasing electrification, which is clearly a big MO for you guys, is accompanied by, it seems, a wave of digitization. We've talked a bit about AI here, we've talked about big data here, and we've talked about digitalization. How does that fit in? How does the word digital data fit into your business going forward as we look to an electrifying future?
Certainly, there is an increasing elements of digitalization in the utility scale system. Digitalization could be interpreted in the way we manage the grid and how the grids could be flexible to cope with the increasing penetration of renewables, but also to be able to regulate the supply and demand that is seasonal from one country to another, or it changes from day and night as well.
And vulnerable, though,
as well. Digitalization could be interpreted in the way consumers will be accessing electricity and choosing when they want to be supplied with electricity. There are emerging business models in many places. Surprisingly, even in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, there's this concept of pay as you go. So the consumer through a phone, a mobile could pay online and then get access to electricity. And by the time he consumes that electricity, access to electricity will cease until he goes online again and pays that. We've seen companies that M-Pesa, for example, in East Africa, have been pioneering in bringing up such models. This will also help some of the discussion we had earlier in terms of how can we invest in sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere when you don't have guarantees. So if you have a concept of upfront payment, then that would also create a new avenue for investment. But of course, it all goes back to the risk appetite for each investor. So digitalization is coming, is real, but digitalization could be about hybrid internet security. All our utility scale plants definitely will have to have firewalls to protect the facility from cyber attack through the net. So I think Siemens is issuing a report tomorrow. There was a loss of nearly globally 7% of electricity because of IT-related challenges. So that is also an enabler at the end of the day that will help support better penetration of renewables and electrification of villages and communities globally.
Dr. Birol talked about the growth in investments in this sector, the sector of electricity, being bigger in 2016 than they were in oil and gas, which must be, an important stage and watershed moment for a business like yours. We also heard talk of whether peak oil demand, the perennial conversation, should be kicked down the road to a certain extent as well, at a time when we see the price of oil going higher once again. Big spanner, I'm talking as you build infrastructure to plant the future, an electrified future on. Is that an enormous spanner in works? Do you worry about that?
About the amount of dollars needed to be spent?
Yeah. And about the price of oil going higher and kicking into a touch, perhaps, a world of excitement in investment in electricity.
The price of oil is often delinked from the price of electricity or the concerns in terms of the cost of making investments into the electricity sector. Where it does play is switching. So if you're going to switch, for example, from a combustion engine to an EV, of course that's where it might play in. But the actual price of oil, to a certain extent, does not impact what we do in terms of investments into the infrastructure space.
What about demand for oil going forward? Does it affect the interest and investment in a renewables and electricity sector going forward?
I think the biggest way that it does impact that is competing for capital.
Correct.
So that, there is a finite amount of capital out there that companies can invest or entities can invest. And to the extent that there are better returns, perhaps, in the oil and gas sector, that's where the money is going to flow for sure. Or if it's more of a governmental decision to direct money that way, through regulation or other incentives. So it can have an impact in that sense. Yes, for sure.
Dreamer vision then for 2020 for you, 2040 and beyond.
I personally think that there will be massive amount of investment into the electricity sector. It doesn't necessarily have to be a power plant. It could also be transmission lines. Very importantly, to have the transmission lines to interconnect and to alleviate some of the costs of congestion or some of the costs of inefficiencies in the network, so that the power can be consumed, or the power that is generated can be consumed. And so I really see a tremendous amount of investments in that area. Renewable, of course, but I don't think renewable is the only answer for the need of investments in the electricity sector. It must be coupled with something that is more reliable and more base load. So it could be nuclear, it could be gas. I think coal will always be challenging for certain countries to invest in, but there are other technologies out there that can attract dollars or money.
And I think that's, I'm going to ask the two of you the similar question. Which technologies will populate the platform going forward?
You see, nowadays we see these new technologies coming abroad, and you know, when the oil was just explored, they say this is the black gold that everyone needs to go and invest in it. Today, the renewable energy is going to be the new gold, but we don't know what the color of that gold. So what is happening? We see that there is a future in the renewable energies, but now we just need to build the trust on the people and the investors, because that is the discussion of today's. I mean, today everywhere we go, you talk about the climate change, and we witnessing the changes of the climate. The issues of the climate change is how we can eliminate or reduce the greenhouse gases emissions, and that can be only avoided when you look to the technologies around renewable energies. Especially, I mean, that is from the side of energy sources, but also the energy efficiencies and other can also contribute around that element. So there is a future. We see it's happening. The price is moving down, which is attract the investors because today is a cost is becoming an issue for everyone. So if you can generate the same energy with a cheaper cost, why not? Especially when you allocate the right region for it.
Electrifying the future, Badr.
Electrifying the future takes the effort of all involved. So it requires the dedication from investors such as Masdar. I think we are very excited with the outlook that has been painted here. But it also takes collaboration from the financial institutions to be able to innovate as well, financial instruments to help projects to be sanctioned. It requires the work from the innovators, from technology developments that will help also bring down costs and increase efficiencies. It requires also the commitment from governments and policymakers to ensure that regulations continue to be investment friendly, so that you see more electrification in a pace perhaps faster than what is being projected. And as a Masdar, we are very excited to have evolved, and we have an open invitation to the audience here to be in Abu Dhabi next week to witness firsthand some of the achievements that have taken place in a short period of time, both on generation point of view, but also from demand side point of view. Masdar City, the mobility, e-mobility. Maybe an information here. Masdar in 2006 launched the first public rapid transportation system based on electrical vehicle, and 2 million passengers have utilized that system since 2006. Last year itself, we've launched a global competition to bring new innovative e-mobility solution to the city to be implemented as the city evolves in the coming decade. So there's a lot of work, a lot of excitement, and very much happy to be part of this journey as a company and as a nation.
And it's a busy time here in Abu Dhabi. It's Sustainability Week next week, and of course the Atlantic Council second meeting this year kicking off that week. I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have from the floor. Dr. Birol, is there anything else that you would like to add to this occasion? Do you think it was a sensible narrative coming from our chaps on the floor? Good, excellent. Any questions from the floor? I know we're getting towards, as I said, we are in the last stretch. It is the home stretch. Well, if there, yes, sir.
Pierre Bernard from Brussels. Question for Mr. Cannon. As an investor, what would you prefer? An open, competitive market with maybe high returns but some risks, or a more regulatory environment where the government intervenes a little bit more but stabilizes the returns?
I'd say the number one thing that we would like is consistency and knowledge of what the rules are and that everyone follows the rules. I think that above all is most important. I think we can easily operate in the open market, the merchant style market. I think we can easily operate in a more closed market where you have the government contracts. What is preferred, I'd say that typically an infrastructure type investor is looking for those long-term not guaranteed, but quasi-assured return levels and cash flows. And so typically speaking for your average infrastructure investor, the more closed markets where you have heavy government participation is usually more preferred. But as you correctly noted, the returns are usually lower because you are taking usually government risk or quasi-government risk. So naturally, the return levels ought to be lower. And if you're taking market risk, then again, the returns ought to be higher. So you see different participants in that sort of market. Maybe not an infrastructure fund, but you might see more private equity or those other types of monies going into that type of investment.
Money chasers, no. Anybody else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Emily Haji from the Canadian Embassy. My question is more about, it's personal, but when you're talking about energy, we kept talking about bringing energy to everyone and how the energy demand is going up, but we haven't really talked about changing our use of energy and how people are trying to decentralize and get into small farms where, there's no GMOs and, have their own wind farms. But we haven't really had that conversation at all here. It's all been about how energy demand is going up, and we're not saying how do we keep that back down. In order to
Which would include a
combat
discussion
climate
about energy efficiency,
Right,
which
there's been less
speaks
of
to the
that.
world of electrification more so than anything, I guess. Bill?
Yeah, typically speaking, a centralized power plant is going to be much more efficient than a decentralized plant, with the exception, most notable exception being solar. And so if you're looking for energy efficiency, it's the more typical utility scale with these big hulking plants and then transmission wires, if you're looking just for pure efficiency. In terms of bringing down the energy demand and reduction of that, that is personal consumption. It's really challenging, certainly for a company like ours, to influence what consumers want to do. You certainly do see your sort of the white appliances, your refrigerators, dishwashers, washing machine and dryers, all becoming much more energy efficient. You see that in your cell phones, your iPads, your other technologies like that. Computers are all becoming more and more energy efficient. But every time there is efficiency gains, you just get another device. And so it doesn't really reduce your overall consumption.
Go on, Bernard. Yeah.
If I may jump in,
Yeah.
the demand on electricity is driven by factors that I think inevitably the demand will continue to grow. Increasing population, growth in economy, industrialization. In this part of the world, the interlink between water generation and electricity or energy. So the demand, all the projections will continue to be there. But the trick here is also how to consume that energy more efficiently. And when we talk about energy efficiency, again, I bring back the example of Master City. Energy efficiency is not only smart gadgets in building where consumer can regulate when to turn on the electricity, the air conditioning, and how when to switch off the lights. But it's also about the architect of the building. It's also about the material and the isolation of buildings. So to protect the buildings, to transmit heat from the external to internal, so that you require less cooling requirement. So energy efficiency in its broader context includes a number of measures. It includes also regulation. Here in the UAE, you have net metering regulation that again helps consumers to be more cautious, self-cautious, to protect and save their energy bill. So regulations in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai. So there's a combination of parameters, design and architect, smart gadgets in building, regulation, decentralized generation, which will help reduce some of the consumption at a domestic level, but overall energy demand on the planet will continue to be there.
They're going up. Anybody else? Fred, sir. Fred Kemp.
Thank you. I want to pose this question to the gentleman from Masdar and to the ministry, and thank you both for your partnership in this incredible 2 days. I go a little bit beyond electrification. Both of you look very much at technologies, particularly at Masdar. Very impressive everything that you've created over the years. As you look at the reduction or the direction of a low-carbon economy or clean energy. We never really expected that natural gas would get the U.S. Reducing its emissions as quickly as it does. There are a lot of other things. Nuclear, we've heard during this week, is going to be a way to get there. As you're looking at technologies, and maybe I can start with you from Masdar, is you're looking at the technologies, whether it's batteries, whether it's solar, whether it's whatever you're working on, what's exciting you the most right now? And I'd like to ask that of both of these gentlemen.
So the transformation for us, for the renewable energy sector, will be at the point where you can couple renewables with energy storage. So we're very much focused on energy storage, on batteries. We have this project up in Scotland, we call it BatWind, whereby we are implementing and will be commissioned by first quarter of this year, integrating offshore wind and energy storage. Moreover, energy storage, in addition to energy storage, we remain focused in terms of wind and solar, and we very much have expertise in photovoltaic and CSP, concentrated solar power. We have expertise on onshore wind as much as we have expertise in offshore wind. But I think another dimension or another area of interest from a technology point of view is waste to energy. Waste to energy is a technology that we are increasingly becoming interested in. We have probably the first regional commercial scale, utility scale waste to energy project. Hopefully next week we'll be in a position to sign the financing for it and sign the EPC for it, basically dealing with landfills. So this is driven by environmental consideration, but the product eventually is clean electricity that is connected to the grid. So I think there will be an increasing attention towards landfills and how we deal with landfills, and waste to energy is one piece of technology, again, that we are becoming more interested in building additional expertise in it. So energy storage, waste to energy are getting to center stage for us, in addition to our know-how in onshore wind, offshore wind, CSP, and photovoltaic.
So adding to Badr, I mean, the issues that facing the renewable energies today, which is known is the battery storage. Today, how I can be secured to be supplied continuously with the electricity from the renewable energies. It is there, but at a certain time, you need to store it in case the climate is changing around in this region or in the location itself. So the challenge is the technology which is now focusing is the battery storage. And now even the charging, like Tesla, where you can have the technology charge it up to 20 minutes. We couldn't hear this past in the 5-10 years ago, but you don't know in the upcoming years you could charge it within less than 2 or 3 minutes. So the technologies or the issues that facing the clean energy or renewable energy is the battery storage. That is something that everyone look at it, and the secure of supply is.
We started with the milk float and we're ending with the milk float. We have come an awfully long way. Anybody else? Then I will thank you, gentlemen. Absolutely fantastic, fascinating. We appreciate your time. Thank you. And as our esteemed guests leave the stage, I will introduce Fred. Fred Kemp, floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, Becky, if you'll forgive me, that was an electrifying end to a turbocharged second annual Atlantic Council Global Energy Forum in Abu Dhabi. You'll all go away thinking about what is it you learned, what is it you heard that you're not sure you entirely agreed with. And then for us, and I think the ministry, our partners, and I what can we do better next year? Because we'll be back here next year. We'll be at the front end of Sustainability Week yet again, and so please join us again. I heard about rising oil prices amid geopolitical risk. I heard about falling extremism amid setbacks for ISIS, new Saudi reforms, and Iranian protests. I heard about 2050 in the UAE, 50% natural gas, 50% renewables, and the new geopolitics of energy, electrification of everything. We've covered some serious ground. We've had countless productive discussions with input from diplomats, CEOs, ministers, innovators, partners, and friends. And you've all taken away lessons and principles to guide you through 2018 and beyond. But I hope, Minister Suhail, I see you're here. It's such an honor to have you here. But I hope you've also taken away relationships. I hope you've also enlarged your own personal communities, because we see this not just as a conference or a forum, but the building of a community of interest to create a better world. And in discussing this and brainstorming this from the very beginning with Minister Suhail, we did a lot of talking about that. Not to mention everything else, we released 4 significant reports. We also wanted deep content here, and not just communities, not just convening. 2 of which were authored by rising stars on our global energy team, Women in Energy by the indomitable Bina Hussein, Shaping Iraq's Oil and Gas Future by the similarly indomitable Ellen Scholl. We also released Jean-Francois Segnick's impressive Renewable Energy in the Middle East paper, supported by the Smith Richardson Foundation, and then Robert Johnston's Asia Energy Transition, moving the oil market one step closer to peak demand. No, I think that was actually the Smith Richardson Foundation. The other was our general set of funders. The reason I mention these funders is, as General Jones reminds me all the time, vision without resources is hallucination. And many of you in this audience helped provide us the resources with which we could do this work. In that spirit, I want to thank just a few. We do owe an enormous debt of gratitude to our presenting partners, particularly Minister Suhail al-Mazroui and the UAE Ministry of Energy and Industry. I'm not sure we've ever had a better set of partners in any of our work anywhere around the world than the ones I'm naming right now. Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, UAE Minister of State and CEO of ADNOC, and Khaldoun Al-Mubarak, CEO of Mubadala Investment Company. In America, we would call this a triple threat that cannot be matched. It's a wonderful set of partners, and no better could you work with. You all have and continue to set the bar high, push the envelope, show us what an energy future could look like. I also want to thank all of our sponsors and all of our partners who helped make this event not only possible, but an extraordinary gathering of the best and brightest in energy. In particular, a huge thanks to the forum's platinum co-chairs, Majid Jafar, CEO of Crescent Petroleum. And it's also always wonderful to see you here, Majid, with your father and your brother. Carl Hopkins, Global Chief Security Officer and partner at Denton's, and also my general counsel. And then Peter Baumgartner, CEO of our official carrier, Etihad. All of their insight and leadership has been invaluable. They truly are partners in putting this together. Also, Becky, I want to give thanks again to CNN. We hope we can continue working with you on this. You're just terrific partners, and with John Defterios as well. And Sky News Arabia, our Arabic language media partner. Finally, I really want to recognize the extraordinary Atlantic Council team. There's probably no better in the business. I'm just so proud that I get to work with them every day. I'll say a couple of names, but after I say the names, please applaud all of them, because this just really scratches the surface of the people who are here doing great work. Ambassador Dick Morningstar couldn't be here right now, but he's the founding director of the Global Energy Center, and then managing Director Randy Bell, along with Bina Hussein and David Karani, really worked to turn this vision into reality. And then hats off to the best events team in the business, especially Julie Varghese and Iveta Kruma for their outstanding leadership. But you'll see people all around, and please thank them as you go out and throughout the evening. So please join me in applauding this enormously qualified. So I'm going to turn it over, I guess, now to Minister Suhail for his closing words. But before I do so, I want to tell you all to come to the Eclipse for the reception following this close. It's a chance to discuss further, build even more relationships, and lay the framework for the future. It's up by the swimming pool. People will guide you there. It's one of the most gorgeous views from this area. With that, thank you so much for coming. We hope to see you next year at the 2019 Atlantic Council Global Energy Forum in Abu Dhabi. With that, Mr. Minister, you've been such a gracious partner and host. It's my honor to turn to you to close this event.
Good evening and thank you. I don't think we would be successful if it wasn't for all of this commitment from your side to attend and join us. I would like to start by thanking His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed for supporting us from the beginning. I remember when we started this, Fred and I, it was just an idea. Is it going to work or not? Can we accommodate and convince ministers to come? And when is the timing? And we were, I think, discussing different times. Do we separate it from two giant events happening in Abu Dhabi in the energy arena? One is ADIPEC and the other one is Sustainability Week. And I think with it was Dr. Sultan's idea to fit it closer to the Sustainability Week, and I think it worked. And I would like to echo the thank to all of the partners, everyone who have supported this, from the photographers, from those who worked late nights to ensure that we have the rooms available. It's really a great working with the Atlantic Council, and I think this is the first time that we work on organizing an event as a Ministry of Energy, totally in partnership with an internationally known geopolitics platform like the Atlantic Council. I'm personally proud of the relationship and we consider ourselves part of the family now. We met most of the members. We have discussed lots of subjects, some of it related to the energy, geopolitics, and we have learned a lot from this relationship. UAE is trying to give a good model, a prosperous model for the region and for many countries when juggling with all of the different energy issues. And I think we have discussed most of those different subjects during the course of those 2 days, and we will continue to discuss more on the renewable energy. I just came from the meeting of the IRENA, where they are very bullish to exercise some of the ideas that we have discussed during the conference, which is how much and how fast do we need to move on this transition. We learned that we cannot live with one form of energy. The different forms of energy will coexist. The competition is going to be to make all forms of energy cleaner, to make them more affordable, because we need to live with less. And part of our strategy is to reduce the consumption per capita by 40%. What does that mean? It means that every individual in this planet, if we want to have enough energy for all, we need to consume less. We need to be wise in our consumption, and we need to consider that if we produce more to satisfy a higher consumption level, that means the planet Earth is not going to be livable, which means more pollution. So what we're trying to do is to have a coexisting system where all forms of energy are competing on affordability, competing on sustainability, and competing on security of supply and reliability of each one of those sources. I personally don't believe in the near term or the medium term that we will have a peak in term of one of those. I think the renewable energy will continue to rise and will continue to become a viable source of energy as we have seen. But I think with more people living on Earth and more people getting access to energy, we will need basically all forms of energy to exist, but we need to produce them cleaner. And I think this is the lesson I learned, and everyone is working very hard in this country to reduce the emission by 70% as part of our strategy. So it's not just production of energy, it's the sustainability element. It's as important. One thing that is very important as well, and we address it, and we try to address it in the Atlantic Council, is the need of safety and security in this region. This region, we have huge and enormous resources that feeds many countries, from the US to China and Japan, and we need peace in this region. And we are discussing how can we contribute to making the whole world a peaceful place where we can execute all of those interesting projects and compete to provide energy for all. I will leave you with those remarks, and it's really a great pleasure to have you all with us, and I look forward to having you and many more next year. But I think we need to grow the rooms to accommodate everyone. Apologies for those who did not have a seat. We know that we were not planning that the increase or the growth would be to this level, but this is the testimony of the great work by the Atlantic Council in gearing up to the increased number of people. And we promise you next year we'll try to accommodate this growth, and we'll try to plan better. And Fred, we need to work harder. You have done a great job, but I think we need to raise the bar next year. Thank you very much.